Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, January 17th, 2025. President-elect Donald Trump says his inauguration on Monday will be moved indoors because of the extreme cold expected in Washington, D.C. Supreme Court upholds the federal law that bans the video app TikTok starting Sunday due to national security concerns. Senate confirmation hearing for South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, President-elect Trump's nominee for Homeland Security Secretary. Topics include border security and homegrown terrorism. Enough Senate Democrats joined Republicans to advance the immigration bill called the Laken Riley Act, which would detain undocumented immigrants accused of theft charges. Final vote on the bill expected next week. President Joe Biden says he believes the Equal Rights Amendment, which guarantees equal protection of the law regardless of sex, is now part of the U.S. Constitution. But the National Archivist says the legal process disputes surrounding the amendment have not changed, and she is not certifying its ratification. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine announces he is appointing Lieutenant Governor John Husted to fill the U.S. Senate seat left vacant by the resignation of Senator J.D. Vance, who will be sworn in on Monday as vice president. Plus the latest on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and hostage release deal. President-elect Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, "It is my obligation to protect the people of our country. But before we even begin, we have to think of the inauguration itself. The weather forecast for Washington, D.C., with the wind chill factor, could take temperatures into severe record lows. There is an Arctic blast sweeping the country. I don't want to see people hurt or injured in any way. It is dangerous conditions for the tens of thousands of law enforcement, first responders, police canines, and even horses, and hundreds of thousands of supporters that will be outside for many hours on the 20th. In any event, if you decide to come, dress warmly. Therefore, I have ordered the inauguration address, in addition to prayers and other speeches, to be delivered in the United States Capitol Rotunda, as was used by Ronald Reagan in 1985, also because of very cold weather. The various dignitaries and guests will be brought into the Capitol. This will be a very beautiful experience for all, and especially for the large TV audience." That post from President-elect Donald Trump. And Ronald Reagan's 1985 inaugural is the coldest on record. It was 7 degrees Fahrenheit, wind chills minus 10 to 20 degrees. This Monday could be in that range. C-SPAN's presidential inauguration coverage will start Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Now to TikTok. From Associated Press, the Supreme Court on Friday unanimously upheld the federal law banning TikTok beginning Sunday unless it's sold by its China-based parent company, holding that the risk to national security posed by its ties to China overcomes concerns about limiting speech by the app or its 170 million users in the United States. AP article goes on, a sale does not appear imminent, and although experts have said the app will not disappear from existing users' phones once the law takes effect on January 19th, new users won't be able to download it and updates won't be available. That will eventually render the app unworkable, the Justice Department has said in court rulings. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, reacting to the decision.
I know you reacted a bit to the TikTok news over there. Turns out the TikTok CEO is coming to inauguration.
Right.
You know, President Trump signaled that he would maybe want to try to keep the app. Would you support if President Trump found a way to keep TikTok on the App Store?
Well, the best way for TikTok to continue to exist is for it to be sold, which the law explicitly allows for. So the problem with TikTok, from a national security perspective, is not the content of it. Although, you know, people raise concerns about it, and I have my own concerns, but that's not why you ban it. Why you ban it is controlled by Beijing. So if it were sold or firewalled, that would be fine.
But what about the optics of the TikTok CEO being at inauguration with the app being banned?
Yeah, well, he's not my favorite guest to the inauguration. But listen, if he wants a job, if he wants to keep his job, the TikTok CEO, I would suggest he go out there and sell his company, which, by the way, there have been multiple offers to do. Now, you asked about delaying the law. The president has the authority under the law to delay the sale or the ban, actually, by 90 days. I suspect President Trump will invoke that authority when he comes to office to allow a sale to go through, and that's fine. That's what the law contemplates.
Or perhaps President Biden in the next couple.
Sure, he could. Yeah, he could if he so chose.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill. Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, had a different take.
Senator, your reaction to the TikTok ruling?
Disappointment. I do believe that banning a social media app like TikTok is a violation of the First Amendment. I haven't had a chance to read the ruling yet, but very disappointed. 170 million Americans express themselves on TikTok on a daily basis, and it's just wrong for the government to ban it. Most of the reasons the government banned it were based on accusations, not proof. They've never been tried and found guilty of sharing information with a communist government or any of that. They've actually offered, through our Foreign Investment Committee that oversees foreign investments, they've offered to have the data here. They've offered to work with Oracle to house the data in the United States. They've offered to have an American board. In fact, it's misreported that it's a Chinese company to begin with. It's owned, 60% of the company is owned by international investors. But disappointing. I don't think the battle's over yet, though. I'm hopeful that President Trump, in coming in, can have some ability. It sounds like Biden left the door open, perhaps, for some executive action from President Trump, and I hope that's what will happen.
Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, on Capitol Hill. A statement from White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. The administration, like the rest of the country, has awaited the decision just made by the U.S. Supreme Court on the TikTok matter. President Biden's position on TikTok has been clear for months, including since Congress sent a bill in overwhelming bipartisan fashion to the president's desk. TikTok should remain available to Americans, but simply under American ownership or other ownership that addresses the national security concerns identified by Congress in developing this law. Given the sheer fact of timing, this administration recognizes that actions to implement the law simply must fall to the next administration, which takes office on Monday. That was a statement from White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. CNN's Pamela Brown posting on X, President-elect Trump reacts to Supreme Court decision on TikTok. It ultimately goes up to me, so you're going to see what I'm going to do, Trump tells me in a brief phone call. He goes on, Congress has given me the decision, so I'll be making the decision. He did not provide further details on what that decision would be. Article from Reuters, President-elect Donald Trump's choice for Homeland Security Secretary portrayed illegal immigration as an invasion and the U.S.-Mexico border as a war zone during a U.S. Senate confirmation on Friday where she pledged to back Trump's hard line on immigration. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who would lead the 260,000-employee department after Trump takes office on Monday, said she would work to reinstate Trump's Remain in Mexico program. That was from Reuters. Kristi Noem's confirmation hearing was before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, asked her about some specific Biden administration immigration policies that will change in the Trump administration.
Will you work with President Trump to reinstate the Remain in Mexico program that the president had in place in his first term, which does so much to ensure that those who would seek to abuse our asylum system are not allowed into the country, and those who have legitimate asylum claims, their claims are processed in due order and in due course, but they wait in Mexico until those claims are fully processed. Will you work to reinstate that program?
Yes, Senator, the president and I have talked extensively about this and will 100% partner with him to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy and make sure that it's in place.
Fantastic. I think Travis might be alive today if that policy had been in place. Let me ask you about CBP One, the phone app that I've called concierge service for illegal immigrants. I'm sure you're familiar with it. This was the Biden administration's effort to allow asylum seekers to apply ahead of time using their phones, but not actually to provide any evidence that they needed asylum. There was a newspaper report, a press report that said the only problem with the app is it never asks users, are you seeking asylum? They don't ask for any asylum evidence. They simply release these so-called asylum seekers who use the app into the country on parole. Sometimes they're never given a hearing. The Inspector General actually did a report, a full investigation report on CBP One, and found that frequently users of this app were claiming the same addresses in the United States as their intended destination, even though they didn't know each other, they weren't family connections. In other words, it has been completely abused. And the idea that the federal government would pay for this kind of concierge service for illegals, I think, is outrageous. Will you end the use of the CBP One app?
Yes, Senator, if confirmed, and I have the opportunity to be secretary on day one, CBP One will be shut down. There's data and information in there that we will preserve so that we can ensure we know who's coming into this country and who's already here. that we need to go find, but also we make sure that there's another program, CHNV, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, where our federal government actually paid to fly people into this country directly from other countries without any vetting or knowing who they are. So there's several of these programs that need to be eliminated, and we need to ensure that we're following legal immigration laws.
I'm glad you just mentioned CHNV. This is this is a mass parole program. Of course, as you know, our law allows parole in only very limited circumstances. There are 2 circumstances, and it requires case-by-case evaluation. The present administration, soon to be gone, has granted mass parole in direct defiance of the law, not case-by-case evaluation. The CHNV program is one of those instances. Will you put a stop to this abuse of our parole law and our asylum system?
Yes, we will go back to case-by-case evaluation of these parole cases and ensure that we have more resources, if you will partner with us, to make sure that our legal immigration system is fully utilized, that we have more judges, more immigration courts, so that we can process people legally and make sure that they are going through that process rather than, like Joe Biden has done, use this as an excuse to allow people to come into our country with no consequences.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, questioning Homeland Security Secretary nominee Kristi Noem at today's confirmation hearing. Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat of Arizona, asked the nominee about President-elect Trump's pledge of mass deportations of undocumented immigrants.
President Trump and some of his other potential staff and advisors have been very vocal about implementing a mass deportation strategy. You know, talking to my agricultural community, my dairy community, they have concerns that this approach will lead to workforce shortages that will further drive up the costs of everything, and something that we have really been working hard to across, I think, in a bipartisan manner to bring down the costs of everything. And unfortunately, this would reignite inflation. What is your plan to ensure safe and legal immigration processes for agricultural workers while protecting local agricultural operations, including those both in of our home states?
Well, Senator, the President and President Trump has been very clear that his priority is going to be deporting criminals, those who have broken our laws and perpetuated violence in our communities. That'll be the priority. And as I spoke earlier with our statistics, having over 425,000 of those with criminal convictions in our country, that will be a focus that we need to tackle right away, and it'll be a big one. Beyond that, his next priority is going to be those with final removal orders, and focus on those individuals who have long overstayed, and that there is a consequence for ignoring our federal laws. Beyond that, we'll continue conversations. As you know, I'm a farmer and a rancher and come from an agricultural state, and we'll work together to make sure that laws are followed. You know, it is the Senate and the House that puts forward the laws. I, as Secretary, uphold the law. So you determine what that is, and debate and discussion. I'll be transparent and share as much information and insight as I have with my background and experience, and continue to work with you.
Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat of Arizona, with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at today's hearing. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, asked the nominee about terrorism, especially attacks like the recent one in New Orleans on New Year's Day, where a man who claimed to be inspired by ISIS drove a truck through a crowd, killing 14, injuring dozens more.
The New Orleans tragedy was the result of a homegrown terrorist born in this country, radicalized by ISIS. And it reflects the reason why the intelligence community, the FBI, almost all of our law enforcement has said repeatedly, domestic violent extremism is the most lethal and persistent threat to our security. That terrorist was radicalized by ISIS. The investigation is underway. We don't know all the facts, but we do know that he was a military veteran, and ISIS was responsible for radicalizing him. Shouldn't we focus on ISIS as a threat to this country's security?
Senator, certainly we should be focused on all threats to this nation's security. That's the mission of the Department of Homeland Security, and homegrown terrorism is growing. We have more and more incidences. The tragedy we saw and the terrorist attack in New Orleans.
What will you do to combat it? What will you do to stop ISIS and other extremist organization from radicalizing people in this country.
Well, certainly, Senator, I'll continue to work with the administration and our partners and the Department of Defense, the intelligence agencies, also within Secretary of State and the other branches and cabinet officials to make sure we're bringing all resources to bear to identify and to stop these types of terrorist activities. What I would say is the cybersecurity and intelligence elements that we have within the Department of Homeland Security have been incredibly siloed. They have not communicated with other intelligence agencies like they should and partnered. INA has some interaction, but not enough. And we also need to have CISA have interaction with the FBI, CIA to make sure they're working together to stop these types of threats and identify when they're growing among our citizens and how they become radicalized.
This area of questioning, I think, is supremely important. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of focus on the border. We all want more border security. We want to stop migrant crime, but let's not take our eye off the ball. The governor of Louisiana for the Super Bowl ought to be really riveted on the potential for homegrown terrorism as a threat. Mm-hmm. And I hope that you will help him and other governors to do their duty to protect the people of the United States from that homegrown terrorist threat.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, and Homeland Security Secretary nominee Kristi Noem at today's confirmation hearing before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. The chair of the committee, Rand Paul, said the committee will hold a business meeting to vote on this nomination as soon as Monday, after President-elect Trump takes the oath of office and can officially nominate her. An article from Axios: Senate Democrats joined with Republicans to clear a critical hurdle on legislation that would require the detention of undocumented immigrants arrested for certain crimes. The Laken Riley Act is on track to be the first bill passed out of the 119th Congress, giving President-elect Trump an early victory on his top second-term priority. The Senate voted 61 to 35, with 60 votes required to limit debate on the measure, setting it on a glide path to passage next week. That was from Axios. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, spoke on the Senate floor before the procedural vote.
Mr. President, the Laken Riley Act is not a complicated bill. It says that an illegal immigrant involved in a theft-related crime must be detained. That means if someone who is in the country illegally, in other words, who has already broken our laws, commits a robbery, he or she will be detained. If this bill had already been law, the illegal immigrant who killed Laken Riley would not have been on the streets the day that he murdered her. When he was cited for shoplifting less than 5 months before that day, he would have been detained, and Laken Riley might still be alive today. That's what we're trying to do here, is prevent another tragedy. Unfortunately, it seems that even a simple and straightforward bill to detain criminal illegal immigrants is too much for some on the left. Some of our Democrat colleagues have spent the week searching for a reason, any reason, to justify voting against this bill. For starters, we've heard that this bill would cover too many illegal immigrants. Well, Mr. President, the admission that there are too many individuals on our streets who have committed a crime after coming into the country illegally is an argument for this bill, not against it. We've also heard that Immigration and Customs Enforcement lacks the detention capacity for the number of individuals that this bill will require to be detained. Well, if resources are scarce, Mr. President, the answer is to provide those resources. The answer is not to let criminals continue to walk our streets. Republicans believe that keeping illegal aliens off our streets is a good investment. And we are currently working on a bill that will provide ICE with additional agents and additional detention capacity. Mr. President, we've also been told that this bill will overwhelm ICE such that there won't be enough space to detain violent criminals. Once again, this is not an argument against the bill. It's an argument for giving ICE more resources and for quickly deporting criminals. Mr. President, these arguments say a lot more about Democrats' unwillingness to crack down on illegal immigration than they say about this bill.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune on the Senate floor. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, said he voted yes on an earlier procedural vote on this bill, but he'll be voting no this time because the promise of allowing amendments was broken.
This morning, the Senate is scheduled to hold a cloture vote on the Laken Riley Act. A week ago, I joined with the majority of my Democratic colleagues in voting yes to bring this bill to the floor on the motion to proceed. We told Republicans we wanted to have a serious and productive and fruitful debate on this legislation, with the chance to vote on amendments to modify the bill. Democrats filed many amendments to the bill, but unfortunately our Republican colleagues and the Republican leader didn't reach an agreement with us. We voted on 2 amendments last night, 1 from each party, and no more. Unfortunately, without more changes, it was 2 nights ago we voted on those. Unfortunately, without more changes to address deficiencies in the bill, I'll be voting no. We Democrats want to see our broken immigration system fixed. We worked with Republicans last year on the strongest immigration bill in a decade. While I do not support this particular bill, I stand ready to work with both sides to pass smart, effective, tough, and common sense legislation to secure our borders and reform our immigration system.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. The Senate advanced the bill on a 61-35 vote, with 10 Democrats joining all Republicans in voting yes. Cortez Masto of Nevada, Gallego of Arizona, Hassan of New Hampshire, Kelly of Arizona, Ossoff of Georgia, Peters of Michigan, Rosen of Nevada, Slotkin of Michigan, Shaheen of New Hampshire, and Warner of Virginia. Vote on final passage in the Senate expected next week. President Joe Biden spoke at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in Washington, during which he announced actions he's taking in the final few days of his administration, including the next round of prescription drugs selected for Medicare price negotiations. They include the diabetes and weight loss drugs Ozempic and Wegovy. Declaring that he considers the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution the law of the land, and commuting the sentences of nearly 2,500 people convicted of nonviolent drug offenses.
Earlier today, I announced 3 major priorities that mark important progress in our country. First, after fighting Big Pharma for decades as a senator and then vice president as president, we finally beat Big Pharma. Instead of paying $400 a month for insulin, seniors now pay $35 a month. But that wasn't the only thing that happened when we passed the bill. Starting this month, the total prescription drug cost for seniors is capped at $2,000 no matter how expensive their drugs are. Even expensive cancer drugs that cost $10,000, $12,000, $14,000, they're not going to have to pay more than $2,000 a year. And finally, we gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices like the VA has been able to do for veterans all along. These negotiations are being implemented in phases. The first phase, negotiated lower prices for the 10 most expensive drugs for seniors, covering drugs for blood clots and so much more. And just this morning, I announced the next phase, the next 15 drugs subject to negotiations. Drugs that will treat cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and so much more, including Ozempic. Hard to say. But it really is an incredible drug. These reforms just don't save seniors money. They save the American taxpayer $160 billion. The taxpayer over the next decade. Why? That $160 billion in Medicare is saving for negotiating lower drug prices in Big Pharma doesn't have to be paid out by the government. $160 billion. Second, just over 100 years ago, a pioneering group of women proposed the Equal Rights Amendment to enshrine the principles of gender equality in our Constitution. Throughout my career, I've been clear, no one should be discriminated against based on their sex. And in order for the amendment to be ratified, it requires 3/4 of the states to ratify it. That benchmark was passed when Virginia ratified the ERA a few years ago. Today, I affirm the Equal Rights Amendment to have cleared all the necessary hurdles to be added to the U.S. Constitution now. The Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land now. It's the 28th Amendment to the Constitution now. I consulted dozens of constitutional scholars to make sure that it was all within the power to do this. And the fact is, we did. And third, our cities are places for a second chance. Earlier today, I commuted the sentence of nearly 2,500 convicted nonviolent drug offenders. These individuals are serving a disproportionately long and harsh sentence compared to the sentence they would receive had they committed the crime today. After spending too long behind bars, these individuals will soon be reunited with their families and communities. With this action, I make no apology. I've issued more individual pardons and commutations than any president in U.S. history. There is more work to do, but when we allow our justice system to be a place of both accountability and mercy, it strengthens our cities and our nation as well, in my view.
President Biden at the 93rd winter meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors today in Washington, D.C. On the Equal Rights Amendment, NPR reports the amendment would need to be formally published or certified to come into effect by the National Archivist, Colleen Shogan. And when or if that will happen is unclear. The executive branch doesn't have a role in the amendment process. And President Biden is not going to order the archivist to certify and publish the ERA, the White House told reporters on a conference call. A senior administration official said that the archivist's role is purely ministerial in nature, meaning that the archivist is required to publish the amendment once it is ratified. In response to an NPR question about whether the archivist would take any new actions, the National Archives communications staff pointed to a December statement saying that the ERA cannot be certified as part of the Constitution due to established legal, judicial, and procedural decisions. That was from NPR. Those decisions include Justice Department memos in 2020 and 2022. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, at a news conference today, had a different interpretation.
The refusal of the United States Archivist to publish the amendment is now moot. She has no constitutional or legal role in the amending process. She does not get to decide what is or is not part of the U.S. Constitution. The purpose of the archivist is to give notice to the states that a law has passed and that the Constitution has been amended. President Biden, through his statement today, has fulfilled that duty and accomplished that ministerial step. He has functionally given notice to the states that the ERA is the law of the land. His statement alone supersedes her authority, and there is nothing left for her to do. The Equal Rights Amendment simply makes discrimination on the basis of sex unconstitutional. Discrimination like restrictions on reproductive care that single out women. It enhances protections against pay discrimination, gender-based violence, or sex discrimination in federally funded education programs or activities. It instantly provides the most effective safeguards post-Dobbs and all its attacks on women's rights and the right to privacy, and serves as a bulwark against a national abortion ban.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, at a news conference in Washington. Again, the National Archives says the ERA has not been certified as part of the Constitution, and a legal battle would likely happen if and when it is certified. Story from the New York Times. Opponents have argued that a 7-year deadline imposed by Congress and later extended by another 3 years meant that the ratification was not completed in time, while proponents maintain the deadline was invalid. Moreover, several states that originally ratified have tried to rescind their approval, adding another point of legal uncertainty to the situation. The Republican National Committee, writes the Washington Times, easily reelected Michael Whatley as chairman, following through on President-elect Donald Trump's request for him to stay on. Whatley successfully steered the RNC through the 2024 cycle, helping Trump triumphantly return back to the White House after vanquishing Vice President Kamala Harris. Casey Crosby, a Kentucky GOP activist who was previously the RNC's treasurer, was elected as Whatley's co-chairwoman, replacing Laura Trump. Neither faced competition. Reporting from the Washington Times, Chair Whatley spoke to the RNC winter meeting in Washington after his reelection.
On Monday, President Trump and J.D. Vance will take their oaths of office, roll up their sleeves, and get to work. They will do so with a Republican Senate and a Republican House. Within days, they will kick off a new golden era of American governance. Thanks to Republican support, they will be able to devote the full breadth of their energy to policy solutions that will make America great again, like restoring our southern border, rebuilding our economy, keeping our communities safe, and ensuring that we are strong enough to protect our interests and our allies around the world. And then, before you know it, the 2026 midterms will be here. They're coming sooner than you think. If we let Democrats seize back control of the House and the Senate, everything changes. The radical left will waste no time in putting the brakes on President Trump's agenda. They will resurrect the worst excesses of lawfare that we have dealt with for the last 8 years. We won't see headlines about the achievements of President Trump's America First agenda. We would see headlines about impeachment proceedings and useless Democratic political stunts. We cannot let that happen. In order to ensure that we have 4 years of success, we must win the midterm elections. We must organize and execute the most aggressive and comprehensive midterm election campaign in American history. In this campaign, the RNC can be the tip of the spear. This organization has got to be the tip of the spear. And as your chairman, I promise you, this organization will be the tip of the spear to protect Donald Trump's term from being derailed by Democrats who care more about their special interest than American families and communities.
Republican National Committee Chair Michael Whatley at the RNC winter meeting in Washington after being reelected unanimously to another term. On Wall Street, the Dow up 334, Nasdaq up 291, S&P up 59. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Get ready for Inauguration Day with a special 48-hour marathon on C-SPAN 2's American History TV. Beginning Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern, relive 20 presidential inaugurations in full, from Franklin Roosevelt's address in 1933 to Joe Biden's speech in 2021. Explore historic newsreel footage capturing the energy of Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C., and discover fascinating stories like the suit coat George Washington wore in his first inauguration in 1789. Don't miss this journey through history. Watch our 48-hour marathon of presidential inaugurals starting Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN 2's American History TV.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Columbus Dispatch newspaper writes that Ohio Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Husted to replace Vice President-elect J.D. Vance in the U.S. Senate on Friday. Husted's appointment ends weeks of speculation about who will join Senator Bernie Moreno, who took the oath of office earlier this month after defeating former Senator Sherrod Brown in November. Husted will serve in the Senate through 2026 and must run that year if he wants to keep the seat. Article from the Columbus Dispatch. Governor DeWine introduced John Husted at a news conference in Columbus.
I came to the conclusion, as you see, that the person who is best suited to be the United States Senator is a person who has been close to me for the last 6 years, a person who almost daily I work with, and that is Lieutenant Governor John Husted. I have worked with him. I have seen him. I know his knowledge of Ohio. I know his heart. I know what he cares about. I know his skills. And all of that tells me that he is the right person for this job. In every major decision that I have made in the last 6 years as governor of the state of Ohio, John Husted has played a part in that decision. And those times, we all don't agree on everything. Fran points out that she and I don't agree on everything. So it should not be a shock that John and I might disagree on some things. But even in the cases where he saw things differently, my decision was informed and was helped by his input. If you look at the specific areas where he has been involved, I started to write them out and stopped after a while. He's been involved in so many things. But economic development, is something, as you know, that John has in his DNA. He started right out of school at the University of Dayton, started working economic development for the Chamber in Dayton. So he certainly has that great experience. Grew up in Northwest Ohio, went to the University of Dayton, ran for the legislature from the Miami Valley, a district in the Miami Valley, ultimately became Speaker of the House, then went to the Senate, as you know from there, served as Secretary of State, and then of course as Lieutenant Governor. He has the background, he has the experience to get the job done.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican, introducing his appointment of Lieutenant Governor John Husted, also a Republican, for the U.S. Senate seat vacated by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, Republican. John Husted spoke about what he would like to focus on as senator.
I have loved this work, and stepping away from it has not been easy. This has been great. My time here at the State House has been a true joy. But representing Ohio in the U.S. Senate is an amazing opportunity. I mean, it is amazing. And it is something that an adopted kid who grew up on County Road J in Montpelier, Ohio, could have never imagined. I know Ohio well, and I will fight for Ohio as a U.S. Senator. Governor knows that. And I really look forward to working with President Trump and Vice President Vance and the Republican majority, who have an America First agenda to fight inflation, stop illegal immigration, and advance conservative values, and that's what I'll do, because that's what the people of Ohio need, and they care about those things. It's what they want. We have an opportunity and obligation to deliver. And I will continue to be an America First conservative who wants to get things done and knows that public service is a temporary gift that you have to make the most of for the people you represent. As a senator, and Governor will like to hear this, he'll want, when I spoke to Senator McCauley earlier today, I told him I was going to do this. So I said, as a senator, I want to return power from the federal government to the states. States are closer to the problems and can innovate and better than the federal government, especially in education, workforce, and social programs, so we can help more people experience the dignity of work and strengthen the earning power of the middle class. As a U.S. Senator, I hope to have a special impact on the role technology plays in our lives. And we know that that impact can be both good and it can be bad. History teaches us that the nations that are the most technologically advanced are the nations that become the most economic and militarily superior. And it's an essential aspect of this if we want to preserve prosperity and freedom for the world and the cause of freedom around the world, that we be leaders in innovation and technology. In an era of AI, technological superiority may matter now more than ever, and I want to play a role in that so that America wins that battle. But technology can also do harm. I want to make sure we protect our kids, our culture, our jobs from the insidious impact that some technologies can have in our lives.
Ohio's Lieutenant Governor John Husted at a news conference in Columbus with Governor Mike DeWine, who is appointing him to the U.S. Senate now that Senator J.D. Vance has resigned to become vice president on Monday. Outgoing Vice President Kamala Harris signed the drawer of the vice president's ceremonial desk at the White House on Thursday, writes UPI, during a ceremony in which she acknowledged that while she may be the face of her office's accomplishments, their work was carried out by a whole team of dedicated public servants whom she served with. In the Eisenhower Executive Office building, Harris signed the drawer of a desk that has been used by each subsequent vice president since Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1960s, though the tradition goes back to the 1940s. That was from UPI. Here's Vice President Harris.
Everyone here has so much to be proud of, and our work is not done. And as you all know me, because we have spent long hours, long days, and months and years together, it is not my nature to go quietly into the night. So don't worry about that. But the ceremony of signing this desk is something that is especially important. So I hope everyone will get a chance to see the desk. But I have actually, I think with the exception of Truman and Eisenhower, met every person who has signed this desk, every vice president, former vice president. And, you know, we don't all, yeah, all of them. In fact, I talked to Mondale, Vice President Mondale, just days before he passed. And I will say that although many of us might have disagreed, me and some of the previous vice presidents, on certain matters, policy matters, I think we all probably have shared a very common experience that is a through line as evidenced by the fact that we have this tradition of signing this desk since 1940, I believe. And it is the work of caring about our country. It is the work of understanding we hold these offices in the public trust with the duty and the responsibility to uphold the oath we take, to respect, to defend the Constitution of the United States, to do our work on behalf of the people of the United States. And so I stand in a long tradition as the 49th Vice President of the United States, in a long tradition of vice presidents who have signed this desk, and I do so with great honor and with the knowledge that our work here has mattered, it has meaning, it has impacted people we may never meet, people who may never know our name, but who are ever, forever grateful for the work that you each and we all together have done. So I thank you all, and with that, I'm going to pull out the Sharpie.
Vice President Kamala Harris with her husband, Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, signing the ceremonial desk in the Vice President's office in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building on Thursday. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, writes AP, said farewell to his department Friday during an event that was filled with all the pomp and circumstance one would expect for a four-star general who led the country through numerous military challenges over the past 4 years. The ceremony was held at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall in Arlington, Virginia.
This is actually my second ceremony retiring from the Department of Defense. And over the past 4 years, my wife Charlene has repeatedly pointed out to me that I failed retirement. But this has been a blessing that I never imagined. And it has been an incredible journey. First 41 years in the U.S. Army, and then 4 more years as Secretary of Defense. As I've said, American democracy is not a sprint, but a relay race. And as we pass the baton, I am very proud of what we've achieved over the past 4 years. In my first message to the force as Secretary, I laid out 3 priorities: defend the nation, take care of our people, and succeed through teamwork. And we have made huge progress on all 3. We have intensely focused the Department of Defense on the pacing challenge from the People's Republic of China. We've made sweeping upgrades to our posture in the Indo-Pacific. We've rallied the free world to help Ukraine fight for its freedom against Putin's imperial aggression. We've led a NATO alliance that is stronger, larger, and more united than ever. We've prevented an all-out war in the Middle East. We've seen Iran's proxies gutted across the region and worked tirelessly to save Palestinian civilians in Gaza. We've also secured a ceasefire that will halt the fighting in Gaza and reunite hostages with their families and surge much-needed humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians in Gaza.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at his farewell ceremony today at a military base in Arlington, Virginia. More from the AP article. During his 30-minute farewell speech, Secretary Austin never mentioned the incoming administration or his likely successor by name, but he did underscore his beliefs about what the Defense Department stands for. He said, "We defend not just the American people, but also the American idea. We are not just any military. We are the United States military. We defend government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we do not bend on matters of honor, integrity, or law." And NBC News writes that Israel's full cabinet, sometimes also referred to as the government, has begun meeting to consider the ceasefire hostage deal, an Israeli official told NBC News. It is very rare for the cabinet to meet on Shabbat, the Jewish holy day, which runs from sundown on Friday to Saturday sundown. But the meeting is going ahead because of the importance of the deal. It is unclear exactly when the cabinet will vote to approve the deal, but it is expected. Israel's government says it expects the first hostages to be released from Gaza on Sunday. That from NBC News. From Associated Press, outgoing Secretary of State Antony Blinken told the AP he hopes the incoming Trump administration will press forward with several key points in President Joe Biden's foreign policy, including on the Middle East and Ukraine. But in an interview Friday, on his last workday as America's top diplomat, he expressed concern that the Trump team might abandon all or some of those policies. Secretary Blinken also spoke to diplomats and staff at the State Department in Washington, urging them to carry on their work.
I believe in the power and the necessity of U.S. engagement and U.S. leadership. We know when we're not engaged, when we're not leading, then likely someone else is, and probably not in a way that advances our interests and values. Or maybe no one is. And then you're likely to have a vacuum that's filled by bad things before it's filled by good things. But equally, I believe in the power, in the necessity of cooperating and working with others, of our alliances and our partnerships, our comparative advantage around the world. America is so much better off when we're working with others, finding common cause, finding common purpose. And I believe in our ability, when we're at our best, unlike any other country, to rally others in common cause and common purpose. But maybe most important, I believe in you, in each and every one of you in this institution. You're the ones who are showing that engagement and that leadership every day. You're the ones who are building those partnerships, strengthening our alliances. You're the ones who are rallying the world in common cause when we need it most.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.